Good evening, everyone. For Telesur, I'm Sarah Begum in Caracas, Venezuela. We start tonight with the news that Assistant Secretary of State Roberta Jacobson will travel to Havana later this month for talks on migration and normalization. Jacobson's trip comes as part of the Obama administration's rapprochement with Cuba, which began last month after more than 50 years of a U.S. embargo on the socialist nation.
While the agenda for this round is not yet finalized, the migration talks are bilateral efforts to ensure safe, legal, and orderly migration between the United States and Cuba. As I mentioned, Assistant Secretary Jacobson will lead the delegation. Of course, the decision to reestablish diplomatic relations is certainly going to be a topic of that, and of course issues surrounding that, including the reopening of embassies, requiring certain logistical arrangements, embassy operations, staffing, visa issues would also be topics as well.
And in Beijing, the China and CELAC Forum is being held. Latin American and Asian leaders highlighted the need for a new economic model in a multipolar world. The presidents of Ecuador and Venezuela talk about the strategic association between Latin America and China. Both nations also signed an important agreement to deepen the economic cooperation. Moving to Peru, that's where former President Alberto Fujimori was sentenced to 8 years on charges of embezzling state funds and using them to manipulate the media. For more, we go to correspondent Rael Mora.
The Superior Court of Lima has sentenced former dictator Alberto Fujimori to 8 years in prison, additional to the 25 years he already has for crimes against humanity. He was sentenced this time for embezzling close to $40 million to buy off tabloid newspapers. The money came from funds from the armed forces. And at the end, he was able to make these newspapers support his campaigns, undermine his enemies, and hide his crimes. In his defense, Fujimori said that he was not aware of any of these crimes. However, the court found out that he had planned them in a premeditated manner and with direct control. Reporting from Lima, Peru for Telesur, Rael Mora.
Thanks to Rael. And now to our correspondent in Argentina, Leonel Poblete, who has a story on a unique site built to create awareness of the terrors of the dictatorship.
Remembrance Park in Buenos Aires was the first site of its kind built in Argentina to commemorate those disappeared by state-led terror during the last civil military dictatorship.
When this place was built, it was decided that it was not going to be a place of death or a cemetery, but one where everybody could reflect together, in a place full of life. It was created with the idea of using art as a platform, as a channel, and as a way to communicate with visitors.
The park has an area dedicated to research, in charge of gathering data on men, women and children who were victims of state terrorism.
We always say that the memorial is not entirely finished because there is no official list of the disappeared, so further research is still being done as we cross-reference lists. As new names emerge, they are incorporated into the memorial.
The educational area at the park focuses on working with children, transmitting to newer generations the importance of human rights, remembrance, truth and justice.
We work with very, very young children from 10 years old. It's interesting to work with this age group because they have a huge capacity to reflect, to imagine, to gauge emotions and to meet that past. When art is used to remember, children's engagement can be profoundly moving and we get meaningful reflection.
Que a nosotros nos conmueve permanentemente y lo que logramos es tener una reflexión realmente muy profunda.
The park's objectives is to create awareness in present and future generations of the horror of state terrorism in Argentina. In the same sense as the human rights policy implemented by Argentina since 2003, the generation of awareness on Argentina's past is vital to build a better, more just country for all. From Buenos Aires, Leo Poblete Goluti, Telesur.
Thanks to Leo. And meanwhile, in France, the far right has taken advantage of Wednesday's tragedy. Marine Le Pen, leader of the right-wing National Front, has publicly called for a referendum to reinstate the death penalty. The presidential candidate says that she would reinstate the death penalty if she wins the 2017 elections. And in the United States, leaders of the New York City Police Union have said that they reject the leadership of Mayor Bill de Blasio. The statement comes as the latest in the ongoing conflict between the New York Police Department and the city's mayor following a series of remarks de Blasio made criticizing racism among police officers. Staying in the United States, a bill to approve the Keystone XL oil pipeline cleared a key Senate committee setting up a fight next week, putting newly empowered Republicans against President Barack Obama and Senate Democrats. It was initially blocked, but now the chamber is under Republican control. The $5.3 billion project would carry crude oil to Gulf Coast refineries from Canada's tar sands.
So it's not about jobs, it's not about energy. Why is this bill so urgent? The answer is money. Money and power. The pipeline might not do much for the American people, but it is worth a whole lot to the Canadian oil industry.
And we go now to Gaza, where despite winter storms, residents are celebrating the entrance of Palestine to the International Criminal Court. Our correspondent Noor Harazin has more.
Here in Gaza, and despite all of the hardships and difficulties that the residents here have been facing due to the latest storm that hit the Gaza Strip, they received such a happy news, which is that the United Nations has confirmed that Palestine will be joining the ICC. And with this action, Palestinians, including political factions, will be able to file war crime complaints against the Israeli side. And this is something that the residents of Palestine and the officials of Palestine have been waiting for.
And we end today in Ecuador, where hundreds of dancing devils have taken over a small town in the Andes as part of an ancient festival. The Dia Blada celebration dates back more than 300 years to Spanish colonialism, where indigenous warriors dressed up as devils to foment rebellion against plantation owners. The festival is recognized by UNESCO and attracts thousands to the small town of Piaro every year. To end this report, we bring you the latest views on the recent Charlie Hebdo massacre in support of the Je suis Charlie's solidarity campaigns. More on these and other stories on our website, telesortv.net/English. For Telesor English, I'm Sarah Begum. Good night.